Hello, in this lecture we are going to talk about terrestrial biomes. Terrestrial is a term we use when we're talking about the land. So these are biomes that we see on our planet that occur on the land of Earth. And so remember, we talked a little bit about biomes earlier before. Remember, a biome is this large system. So it's a large piece of land that has both living and non-living parts that are interacting to make up this large system. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the different types of biomes, and as we do, I want you guys to keep this essential question at the forefront of your thinking. Think about why and how there are different biomes on Earth. So think about what characteristics contribute to these different types of biomes. A lot of them are listed right here, and ultimately, all of these characteristics or variables contribute to the type of biome that we see in a particular area. So all of the biomes are organized in this diagram, and we can see that they're organized by differing temperatures, by differing amounts of precipitation, and also latitude, so where they occur on Earth's surface. So remember, our planet Earth has the equator, and latitude, lat lines flat, so latitude are the lines that are parallel with the equator. So let's start with the tundra. The tundra is the highest latitude biome that is the furthest away from the equator, and it's the coldest. So if you think about the angle at which the sun hits the poles of our planet, it's not as direct as that at which it hits the equator. So at these poles, we see tundra biomes, and we also observe this permafrost. This is a term that refers to the frozen layer of soil beneath the surface here. And that dictates a lot of what can occur on the surface as far as vegetation. So notice how there are not any trees. So in this area, trees are not observed because the permafrost does not allow for those deep, intricate root systems to become established. So instead we see this small vegetation, a little bit of grass and shrubs, but we don't see large vegetation because of the permafrost. So remember that this is the furthest north biome. It's pretty barren all year round. So in the summer and the winter, not much going on. It's pretty cold all year round, obviously colder during the winter months where we get some snow. In the tundra, you can see there are a variety of organisms that have various adaptations that allow them to survive in this type of environment. You see a lot of these white coat animals. The Arctic fox here has a white coat, and it has a variety of purposes if you think about how it contributes to its ability to survive, one of them being camouflage. This guy also has a darker coat in the summer months that allows it to camouflage when the environment is of a different color. And that phenomenon is common in other organisms as well. So look at these organisms and think about what type of characteristics and traits do they have that allow them to survive in these cold environments. One of the human impacts that is significant, has a significant impact in the tundra includes hunting. So a lot of people unfortunately enjoy going to the tundra and hunting. Here is an individual who was hunting a swan. Okay, in the northern part of Alaska, this is one of the things the tundra is famous for. We have the Prudhoe Bay, and this area is rich in oil. So a lot of major oil companies pump oil from this location, and they send it to the southern part of Alaska through the transatlantic pipeline, and then distribute that resource from there. The next biome is called the taiga, or the boreal or the carnivorous forest biome. This occurs just below the tundra. So you can see that there's a tree line here. This is a new biome where we observe some different systems. Here in the taiga, you'll see evergreen trees, evergreen meaning that they do not drop their leaves throughout the seasons or the year. So you'll see a lot of pine trees and fir trees. It is also very cold, not as cold as the tundra, but it's still very cold. It has cool summers and winters. And you can see that this is the biome that is at a lower elevation than that of the tundra. So you can see that there's a pretty distinct border at which trees can start to establish their roots to create this newer biome. In the taiga, you can see a variety of organisms. They all have various adaptations to allow them to survive in these environments. There tends to be a significant amount of rain, which causes or allows the plants to be green pretty much all year round. Here we have a marmot, a moose, a lynx, and some bears. A lot of these organisms can be found in Washington or Oregon or the northern parts of California. When we're talking about human impacts in this biome, a lot of trees are cut down and used as timber. We see a lot of timber being collected in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And we also see the use of water, dams, and ultimately hydroelectricity, using the power of water to generate electricity. Our next biome is called the temperate deciduous forest, or seasonal forest, and it's called deciduous, which means to fall, because here we see trees that drop their leaves. So these are trees that during the fall season, the leaves will drop, and that is a way, a strategy that these plants take to save energy. So it's during the fall months that sunlight becomes less available for photosynthesis. And so in order for those trees to conserve their energy, since they are not doing high rates of photosynthesis, they're going to drop their leaves, conserve some energy, and then grow brand new leaves when sunlight is more readily available for photosynthesis in the spring months. So these biomes are seen pretty commonly on the East Coast. So think of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. They have periods of time where the trees often have leaves of bright, vibrant colors, and then after that they fall out or fall down. So that would be an example of a deciduous forest. In the deciduous forest, you can see a variety of organisms. Raccoons are common here, along with some of our other guys. Raccoons are not just solely found in deciduous forests, but are pretty common. And then we have deer, salamander, bull elk. And one of the main human impacts, again, is the collection of trees used for logging. So a lot of the forests on the East Coast have been logged. A lot of those forests have been chopped down, and secondary forests have since started to grow. Another human impact includes mining. So a lot of minerals are extracted from this biome and obviously alters it. Our next biome is the temperate grasslands, and this is well known for its fertile soil. And fertile soil just means that it contains many nutrients that are available to sustain plant growth and agriculture. Because the soil is so fertile, we often see agricultural practices happening in these biomes. So we find a lot of grasses, many grazers or animals, organisms that eat vegetation and just graze, like the bison here. But as a result, it's also one of the most abused or overused biomes because of these agricultural practices. So if you consider all the impacts that are a factor or an end result in agricultural practices, there's quite a number of them. Think of all of the different things we do to ensure agriculture practices are running smoothly and maintaining high yields. So there's a lot of different things that we add to the environment or manipulate the environment in a way that is not very sustainable. So in the temperate grasslands, think of like Kansas and Nebraska, the mid-latitude locations on our planet. Agriculture is going to be a very big practice there often, along with CAFOs. So this is a picture of a CAFO, or a concentrated animal feeding operation. And so one thing that results in CAFOs is soil compaction. Soil is compacted or pushed down. So take a look at these cows. These cows are obviously heavy animals, and they have hooves, and all they do is walk around on this soil day after day, and they compact the soil. The soil gets so compacted that it turns into kind of like a cement-like floor. And by removing the airspace from the soil, compacting it down, it limits the ability of water and nutrients to infiltrate back into the soil. So remember, soil is one of our resources that can renew at its own rate and become fertile again to be used. But because soil is being compacted, what happens is that when it rains or nutrients are introduced into this environment, the rain and the nutrients cannot infiltrate into the soil. Instead, they just run off into the nearest waterway, and it doesn't replenish the soil. So that ultimately results in desert-like conditions, or this phenomenon called desertification, because the soil ultimately gets depleted of water and nutrients. Our next biome is something you guys have probably heard of before, called the savanna. It is found very close to the equator, and it has dry, hot summers and cold winters. And you'll see a lot of familiar organisms. You kind of think of Africa. There are savanna biomes in Africa that have cheetah, giraffes, elephants, and zebra. All these organisms are adapted to survive or have adaptations to survive in this environment. Now, right about the equator, we find the tropics. So here we find the tropical rainforest, and in this biome we see it looks very lush. There's a lot of precipitation, so water is abundant, but the soil tends to have a minimal amount of nutrients, and that is because these plants have the ability to efficiently absorb the nutrients from the soil quite quickly, resulting in soil having that low nutrient, poor quality. In the tropical rainforest, we'll see a variety of organisms and these large leaves. Look at this large leaf the white-handed gibbon is holding. Think about why this leaf might be so big. If it was found in the lower parts of the tropical rainforest of the canopy, leaves are big because at the bottom of a canopy, as opposed to the top of a canopy, there's not a lot of sunlight available. So these large leaves are trying to capture the very limited amount of sunlight that reaches the bottom of the canopy, because everything above it at the top is blocking the sunlight from them. So we see a lot of large leafed plants, especially towards the bottom of the canopy, and all these organisms in the tropical rainforest. One of the most significant impacts that we see by humans in the tropical rainforest includes the collection of plants for medicinal purposes. So we are collecting these plants that are used in the production of prescription drugs. Here we see a picture of the rosy periwinkle plant that is used in the production of a medicine that treats childhood leukemia. Another impact that is significant in the tropics includes deforestation. Deforestation we've talked about before, and how it ultimately results in negative it has negative impacts on the environment. So when we chop down forests or trees, we see that there's an increase in carbon dioxide because we just removed the potential of a bunch of trees to photosynthesize by removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into oxygen. But now that the trees are gone, that carbon dioxide will remain in the atmosphere. And then think about once these trees are all chopped down in this area, we can then use that land for a variety of purposes. All of these land uses would ultimately result in other environmental impacts. We could put cattle in there and cause them to graze or allow them to graze. We could plant a bunch of crops and use this as agricultural land. A lot of people tend to clear out land and try to get the soil rich with nutrients before they plant their crops with this technique called slash and burn. So in the slash and burn technique, we see the removal of vegetation in an area, and then all that vegetation gets lit on fire to reintroduce those nutrients back into the soil. Then the farmers can use the soil to grow plants, but this is not a sustainable practice. The cycling of the nutrients in this way can only maybe last for a couple of years. So it's not really a great long-term solution or approach to growing plants. Our next biome is called the temperate rainforest. This is a rainforest that is a bit cooler than the tropics. You'll see that the tropical rainforest is shown in the bright green, which tends to occur right around the equator. The temperate rainforests occur close to the coasts. So there are parts of various continents that have temperate rainforests. It's not as common as the tropical rainforest, but know that there are some coastal mountains involved with the temperate rainforests. The chaparral. So this biome has several different names. They all refer to the same biome, the chaparral, Mediterranean, or shrubland biome. We see a lot of this biome near us where we live, and this is another biodiversity hotspot. There are a lot of different types of organisms living in this biome, similar to how we think of the tropical rainforest as being a biodiversity hotspot. The chaparral also is considered a biodiversity hotspot. In this area, we have wet winters and warm summers, and a lot of organisms are fire dependent, where they require fire to either release their seeds or germinate. There's in some way fire dependent. And remember, fire is a natural, it can be a natural part of an ecosystem, of a biome. Obviously, we see more fires are occurring more frequently in various parts of our planet, which is linked to human use of land, a topic we'll talk more about later. In the chaparral, let's start by pointing out where the chaparral is. Here's our equator. There are 5 different locations about our planet where we see the chaparral. One of them is Northern California. We also see some in South America, in Europe, in the southern part of Africa, and in parts of Australia. But notice how these biomes all occur about the same distance away from our equator, so the same latitude. In the chaparral, we see a variety of organisms. If you've been up to Annandale or Haworth Park, maybe you have had the chance to see some of these organisms. These are very common chaparral organisms. One of them, next time you go to the park, look for this manzanita tree. This is an example of a fire-dependent plant. We also have the scrub oak. And in the chaparral, we see a lot of urbanization, so building. So we're clearing land, we're building, roads, we're building homes, and as a result, we are adding pollution to the air, we're polluting the water, there's an increase in disease, we are introducing non-native plant and animal species to the environment, and obviously we are removing habitat for other organisms to use. Okay, I believe this is our last biome we're talking about are the deserts. This one you guys have probably heard of before. So a lot of the organisms that we observe in the desert have adaptations that allow them to conserve water and or avoid that intense heat that is present during the day. So let's talk about the rain shadow effect. So the rain shadow effect describes how we get this dry air on the opposite side, the leeward side of a hill or a mountain. So this is, think of this as the Pacific Ocean. The prevailing winds are going to carry this water that's cool and moist and has a lot of water, and that water is going to move up this mountain, and it is going to drop the water as it goes up because that air cools, and that water is going to be released on the windward side of this mountain face. Then the air is going to go over this mountain peak and it's going to start to descend, and over on this opposite side it's descending as dry air because the water was released on the opposite side already. So this dry air creates this desert-like climate or biome on the opposite side of the mountain. So we see this happening all about the equator and about 30 degrees latitude, either north or south of the equator. So this shows how we have this warm, moist air is rising up, and then it is going to travel back down through one of these Hadley cells. So the air is going to be released in rain clouds, and that cool air is going to descend as dry, cool air because we got rid of the water. So we're going to see these desert biomes in these 30-ish latitude locations. In the desert, you can see a variety of organisms. Here we have some meerkats, a tortoise. All of these organisms have characteristics or adaptations that allow them to either store water for long periods of time, or they burrow into the ground to stay cool and avoid becoming dehydrated. And then let's talk about some of the human uses. A lot of deserts contain minerals, and so we mine for these minerals and manipulate the environment. So those are all of the biomes. I want you guys to remember that biomes are dynamic. So they are systems that change as other environmental conditions change as well. So one of the ways in which they're changing are due to those human impacts and uses we talked about. But if you think about biomes as they were several hundred years ago, they probably looked a little different than they do now. And that's because these are dynamic, large systems.